All right, guys, I'm going to show you how to unlock the infinite money glitch in life. And I mean this. So, if you're a business person, if you own a business, or if you're a young person and you're in business, it honestly doesn't really matter what age you are right now. It doesn't matter where you are necessarily in your journey. What matters is that you are a business owner and you're looking to actually unlock like an enormous amount of wealth. And the way that I'm going to frame this is that you can stack multiple exits over a period of a lifetime. Okay. And the reason I want you to sort of think about this way is because I'm fairly convinced that you can do this at a super duper young age. Okay. So you can do this by the time you're 25. And I'll actually explain a real life example of that and how I've helped somebody actually achieve this and help myself, frankly, because I own part of the company. So, how do the richest people create wealth? Right, the richest people create wealth. You can Google. I just did a screenshot of a Google search. Primarily by founding, owning, and scaling businesses. Right, finance is up there. Finance and investments. That's your hedge fund guys. Technology. Those are the top industries. But these are like the billionaires. Okay, what if you just didn't need $1 billion? You could strive for this. By the way, there's plenty of people who do that. Plenty of people who achieve. But I just wanted you to see that you have to have ownership, okay? You have to own some type of business, and we'll get into this. But let's define your number. You have to work backwards. This is like everything in life, right? So figure out what you need. For some, that might be 5 million. For some, it might be 10. For some, it might be 50. For some, it might be 100. I don't care. At some point, you realize, and I've never had $100 million, I've never had $50 million, but I've been worth 8 figures. And at some point you realize like you kind of don't care anymore. And that's okay, by the way. You don't have to listen to the internet that says you have to be a bajillionaire. Okay. There is a number that is good for you. You need to understand what that number is. Okay. And you can reverse into that number as well. It also depends on how old you are and what your current expenses are. So I think $5 million liquid is like all you'll ever need. And I'm going to make that argument. I'm not telling you what to do. By the way, this is not financial advice. Consult a financial professional, consult a lawyer and an accountant. I'm an idiot on the internet. Don't listen to me. But this is my opinion. I think that 5 million liquid is probably more than you'll ever need, particularly if you make 5 million before the age of 30, okay? Which is the caveat to this entire video is that you're doing this at a young age, okay? And that is the next point. So number one, figure out what your number is, okay? And that number will depend on how old you are, right? So you might need to make more. You might be playing catch up in life. And if you're a business owner, I've scaled and exited and sold a business that we sold for almost $70 million. I did that in 3 years. Okay. So and then I went and did it again in a different industry, real estate. So valuation works slightly different, but total valuation of all the properties was around 40 million, right? So again, that was probably less than 3 years. So this is all very, very doable. Okay. Like real examples of this being done. And there's tons of examples you could look up in the news. Start as young as possible. Okay. This is absolutely critical. So if you're considering going to school, or I have to say this, so the best time to plant a tree was, 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. Right. So, if you're somebody who is, currently scaling, which is really who I'm talking to, this is, for a business owner. And I don't care if you're doing 5K a month, 20K a month, 50K a month, 500K a month. Right. If you're scaling and your goal is eventually to exit, like you need to be aware of the game that you're playing. Right. Because a lot of the time people are just building for the sake of building, which I think is okay. And if you plan to hold the business forever, then, maybe ignore what I'm saying. But, if you ever plan to sell the business, like even if it's 20 years from now, you need to be thinking about this. Okay. Because you need to be building towards something. So you need to get in the game. If you're a young person, I would totally skip college. I went to college. I have a degree in business economics. I don't use that degree at all. Everything that I learned in terms of finance, accounting, building businesses, marketing, sales, everything I learned on the job. Okay. So you can go acquire the skills, and you can do that through, now we have this wonderful thing called online education. I don't care what anybody says, it's not a scam. You can learn incredible skills and you can accelerate the path to the result, right? Alex Hormozy talks a lot about this. Invest in compressing the timeline. You could go try to figure out, how to speak business math, which is my first recommendation. You could like go to school for 4 years like I did and spend $200,000 on a degree, or you could buy a program, which by the way, the investment banking groups will put you through, even no matter what school you went to, they're going to put you through their own financial modeling and accounting and finance courses. And you could buy those for like $3,000, right? So why go to Harvard and get a finance or an economics degree when you can just go buy the thing that the guy Goldman's going to put you through anyway? Okay. This is the beauty of where we are today in the world. You can go acquire all of the skills that you need to build anything. How amazing is that? So if you're a young person, you have such an advantage, both from a time perspective, and your cost of living is obviously quite low. If you're still living with your parents, or you're paying rent or whatever. I have a family, I have a mortgage, I've got cars, I've got car insurance, I've got all kinds of crazy stuff. If you're young, you have the ability to just absolutely go all in. And that's what I did at a pretty young age. And it happened to work out. Okay. Skills. Go learn to speak the language of business. Why did I put this first? I put this first because I work with CEOs who built companies, and you don't necessarily have to do this first, by the way, but I recommend it because you need to learn to speak the language of business. The language of business is spoken in finance and accounting. The language of business is spoken in hitting KPIs and understanding how to build a dashboard and understanding how to reverse engineer an outcome, which is really what we're doing right now. Business is just a giant math problem, and you can model these math problems out. So every time we come into a company, we're modeling out the scenario. So if I know I need to get to $10 million a year of revenue, well, I know I need to do $833,000 a month, right? Something like that. So how do I get to that? And I did a video actually on how I was reverse engineering $10 million money math. That video is, the notes are right here, right? So like I literally will go through and model out exactly how I'm going to get there. Understand, and I've worked with CEOs who don't know how to do any of this. And that's why a lot of the time, that's why they're stuck, is they're not running the money math in their business. I work with executives who don't know how to do this. I've worked with marketing directors. I've worked with sales directors who do not understand the money math, okay? If you want to be an A player, A players operate on money math. End of story. Otherwise, you are a B or a C player at best, okay? The next skill, learn marketing. Marketing and sales, they're obviously different, but marketing is critical because I think it gives you a ability to convince someone to do something without having to speak to a human being, right? If you can achieve that, that is a better outcome than having to get somebody on the phone with a person, right? There's just more friction from point A to point B. So the idea is learn good marketing. And I think one of the best things that you can do is actually try to get somebody to buy something like direct to cart from the internet. That's actually really hard, right? Without ever talking to a person, you're required to write good convincing sales copy. You're required to learn how to write good advertising. Obviously, AI can help with all this, but the great people are using AI, but they're not just throwing AI slop out there. You have to know what good looks like. And then obviously sales. The sales is the ability to convince someone to do something. I have built and exited roughly a little over $100 million in companies. I have raised tens of millions of dollars. That is a sales process. I personally have never been in a direct sales role, right? But that is a sales process. I have led businesses. I have bought businesses, multiple businesses. Buying a business, allowing someone to acquire their company, allowing you to acquire their business, that is a sales process. You are convincing that person that you are the one to be able to break through that next level. And I've done that multiple times now, right? Now, when you're young, it's a little bit different. You may not have a track record, and that's okay, right? But you're full of piss and vinegar, right? You can do anything. You can stay up all night. You have endless amount of time. You have no expenses, right? You can rail all of that right back into your effort, okay? So that you have advantages that I don't have. I now have a family, right? So I clock out at 4 o'clock every day. I'm done. I'm hanging out with my daughter. I don't care if I don't make more money, right? You can beat me now because you have more time and more energy, okay? Next would be, I think, the last bucket, and I think this is where a lot of people get bogged down, is operations and fulfillment. Let me just qualify that. Building a great product is really, really, really important. I am not saying produce garbage. I am not saying to scam people. I am not saying to produce a low quality product because you're going to get blown out in the marketplace. You have to build a great product. To me, that's kind of a given, right? But yeah, I think it is a secondary skill to the other ones that we have on here. Why? Because I think it's actually the easiest to hire for, right? It's like everybody's afraid AI is going to eat software. But code was never the challenge with software, right? Building, nurturing, and scaling a community of happy paid customers who are using software, activated customers, that is what makes software difficult. You can have like instant code all you want, but you still have to go do all of those other things, which are extremely difficult to do, right? So that's why I'm saying operations fulfillment, again, very, very important. Product is extremely important. All of our portfolio companies, the first thing I say is you have to have the best product on the market, right? Great product means you don't need marketing or sales, right? The challenge is, it's very, very difficult to create a market leading product. So I would say go get good at marketing and sales because you can survive. You don't need to hit that absolute perfect timed product market fit, right? Because the market's demands are fickle. And I think a lot of the people who absolutely smash that are just lucky. Don't tell them that, but I think a lot of them are. All right, next. You must get equity in a cash flowing business. Okay, this is how you get rich. This is an infinite money glitch right here. Okay, you have to have equity in a business. End of story. I don't care what anyone says. Can you make a lot of money other ways? Sure, but I don't want to talk about it because it's not relevant for this conversation. And this is the most predictable, most likely way to do it. Okay, and there are 3 ways to do this, right? So 1, you can start your own company. That's really difficult. I've done it. It's very hard. It's awful. You don't get paid for a long time, and you have a very low chance of success. So I would probably not do this one. Okay, even if you're young, I would go do one of these other ones. Majority acquisition, meaning you buy an existing business. So if you can go and save $50,000 to $100,000, which as a young person is absolutely doable, by the way, you can go and buy a business with that. How cool is that? Now, should you go and just blow that on any business? No, I don't want to talk about due diligence. I don't want to talk about financial due diligence. I don't want to talk about market analysis. I don't want to talk about any of that right now. I'm not saying you should go do this, but you could, and it can be done properly. Now, if you do it properly, you just immediately stepped into a business that generates money, like instantly. So if you buy a $100,000 business, let's say you paid all cash for this business, which you wouldn't do, and you buy that business for 2 times earnings. Well, you just bought $50,000 with your $100,000. You just bought $50,000 of income, or whatever the math is that on that $4,500 a month or something like that. Right, so your $100,000 is instantly generating $4,500 a month, and then you get to grow it, right? So there is a way to step into this, okay? And most people can accumulate $50,000 to $100,000 of equity. Now, I'm not going to get into how you would use debt to even leverage that further, but you can do that as well. Maybe I'll do a separate video on that. Another one is what I call a growth partner or growth operator model. This is what I do in our firm. This is what Profit Scale does. So we will come into a bit, and candidly, I have also done majority acquisitions. I've bought, built, and sold majority of companies before. Okay, which I still do that. I'm always looking for opportunities. But right now, our portfolio is entirely consistent of deals where we have a minority equity stake, and those minority stakes range from 30% all the way to 45% of the business. Actually, that's not true. I have one that is about 9%, and we're not active at all. Right, basically just take a board seat and get on a phone call every quarter. Okay. But they generally are meaningful minority stakes in businesses. And usually I do this with $0 out of my pocket. So I will come in and I will say, listen, based on this vesting schedule, so if I do A, you give me B, and that changes based on performance. So if I say I can get you to 100K a month, cool. Well, now I have 25% of your company. When I get you to 250K a month, well, now I have 35% of your company. If I get you to 500K a month, well, now I have 45 or 49% of your company. You can make these numbers whatever you want. And that person is basically going to say, well, listen, you're going to come in, help me scale my business. You're going to help me grow my business. You're going to install the systems. You're going to run the sales. You're going to run the marketing. You're going to do all that stuff. And I can just go do what I want to do over here. Usually business owners and founders are product people. They just want to do product, right? They want to advocate for their product. They want to interact with their customers. They want to just do that. That's the thing. They want to go build stuff. And that's fine, right? As long as they can give you what you need to actually grow the business, that's a perfectly fine seat for them to sit in, right? And you step into kind of the chief growth officer role. And you can do this as a young person. By the way, sidebar, I was hanging out with the people from Fanbasis who just got a $1.6 billion valuation. This is public knowledge. You can go look it up. That entire team is all like 20-something-year-olds. Their chief growth officer is 23 years old. Their CMO is like 28, okay? and he's really smart, right? These are smart young kids. But honestly, they're more hustle than they are anything else. Like they're great kids. They're willing to go work. They're willing to do whatever it takes. And I'm sure they have some type of stock option compensation. So when they go and exit for 2 billion or whatever the heck they're, hopefully they get to that point, they're going to get, these young people are going to make millions of dollars. End of story. Like they'll be, maybe even deca millionaires by the time they're 30. Right? So this is absolutely possible. And there's a bunch of different ways to do it. The way that I am suggesting is go in and, earn your keep. Another way is go join a company that's like a fan basis, help them build, sacrifice your life for 3, 4, 5 years, scale the heck out of it, and take some stock options and help them exit, right? There's a couple different ways to do this. Now, back to my way. I seek to exit every 3 to 5 years, meaning I want to have a liquidity event every 3 to 5 years, okay? Now, let's use our $5 million number, which I actually I backed it down to 4. And you'll see that in a second. But to get to a $5 million exit, let's assume you started 18. Let's assume you started as a very young person, okay? And if you're already in business, you have no excuses, by the way, because I've seen people, I've done this myself, and I've seen people do it way faster, which I'll get to in a second. But let's say that gives you 7 years to get to this outcome, right? So from 18 to 25. Let's say at 18, you go and you work, you pour yourself into a business, you partner with somebody, you take 20, 25% of their business, or maybe you buy 100%, right? But you've got some equity stake, and you've got 7 years to exit. And you can tell them that. I'm going to help you exit in the next 7 years. Cool. That's your outcome. That's your target. And here's the target I'm going to hit. Okay. But let's assume $5 million exit, 100% ownership, keeps the math simple. I don't have to build a whole waterfall and all that other crap, right? So $5 million exit, 25% EBITDA margin, and at $5 million, you're probably going to be in the 3 to 4x range. I could argue you probably get to 5, but let's just use 3 to 4x. So what is 3 to 4? What are we 3 to 4xing? We're 3 to 4xing EBITDA, okay? Which means that you need to be generating. I'm interchanging EBITDA and profit. Again, if you learn finance and accounting, you'll understand the difference between EBITDA and profit. But for now, I'm interchanging the two. Okay, that's technically not accurate. Well, what do we have to achieve? Well, you need to achieve a $1.25 million EBITDA number, right, on an annual basis, meaning you need to profit $1.25 million per year, okay, at a 25% profit margin. That means in revenue, you need to be generating $415K a month. Does that sound crazy? It's a lot of money, no question. But does that sound absurd? I just saw that Stephen Cohen, I think he made $9 million a day. He's a hedge fund guy, right? So I want you to break this into perspective, right? Like $415,000 a month, that's not much. My one portfolio company does that. And on the low side, on the high side, you have to make a $1.7 million profit. Now, that's only if you got a 3x. If you're generating about $1 million or more in profit, I would argue you could probably get five times EBITDA. And if you can't, you have a shitty business broker or investment banker, right? Depending on the industry. If you're in an agency business, that's different. You're probably going to be in the 2x, 3x range. Now, let's just say this is totally possible, right? But if you are starting at 50K, 100K, 150K, you could totally get to these numbers. My one portfolio company was doing 26K a month. Now we're roughly in this range. We did 452 in December. Now, what about taxes? You're all going to say, well, you should utilize, and again, I'm not an accountant, hire a lawyer and a professional accountant. I am not licensed. This is not advice. This is just some guy on the internet talking about stuff. Utilize the qualified small business. I forget what the last S stands for, but anyway, there's a tax classification, qualified small business stock plan, where if you turn that business into a C Corp, and there are disadvantages, you can eliminate 100% of your capital gains up to, I think they just raised it to $15 million, meaning you can get $15 million in gains tax free. Yes, you heard that correctly. Well, what's the catch? The catch is that business has to be a C Corp. So if you pay distributions of any kind, you're going to get double taxed. Yeah, like dividends, essentially, you're going to get double taxed. Okay, so that business, on all of its income, here's how double tax works. Business makes income. At the end of the year, has $100,000 in income. You're going to get whacked on that, okay? And then any money you send to the shareholder as a dividend is also going to get whacked, right? That's what double taxation is. Now, what should you do during this building phase? Throw yourself on salary. Yes, you're still going to get taxed on salary, okay, but make sure that it's enough. But your salary is a deductible expense, okay? So what you do is at the end of the year, basically just spend all of the money that you earn growing the business, which means you should be able to scale way faster than 7 years. If you're investing everything beyond your salary, and again, you can adjust your salary so you're sucking all the income out, whatever. There's things you could do to, mute the effect of this. But if you put yourself on a reasonable salary, 100, 150 grand a year, whatever, enough to cover your living expenses, all of that money can be reinvested back into the business to continue to grow it and fuel that growth. And then you have no tax at the end of each year because you have no income, right? You've reinvested everything back into the business. And then the likelihood of you getting to that 7-year mark faster increases significantly. Okay. This is how you do it without paying any taxes or minimizing your tax burden. Now, let's assume that you just don't listen to that because you don't take good advice and it wasn't advice. Don't do that. Hire a professional. But let's just say you didn't do that and you paid 20% capital gains, long-term capital gains on that, okay? I want you to then take your $4 million, right? So capital gains, 20% of $5 million. Let's assume it's net, so ignoring expenses for a minute. That would put 20% less, or 80% of 5 million is $4 million. Okay, so you own 100% of this. You put $4 million in your pocket by the time you're 25. Now I want you to think about it this way: invest your money for income, not for growth. You should have a portfolio that resembles like a 90-year-old. And all financial people are going to be like, that's stupid. Well, I have a friend who's very, very, very rich, and he has hired a private banker. I should say their name, but I won't. They basically take care of rich people's, like really rich people's money. You have to have a certain minimum to get in here, and it's in the millions, and that's liquid. And he called me up and he's like, dude, what do you do with your money? And I was like, manage it all myself. And he's like, well, yeah, I'm probably going to do that because my financial advisor is very expensive. And over the past 5 years, guess what they made me? And I'm like, what? And he's like, 5% in 5 years, when we've had record markets in 5 years. So, and obviously they're probably investing for growth. So he's not even getting any income out of that. It's absolutely absurd. They're useless. AI is going to wipe them out. Forget about these people. Remember, I'm not an advisor, but they're useless. Do your research and make a decision for yourself. My point is, if you were to invest for income and you can generate 10%, and there are plenty of places where you can generate roughly a 10% return, and you can do that in a relatively safe, diversified manner, that would put $400K a year in your pocket, or $33,000 a month. That should pay for your life. Do you know how much money $33,000 a month is? Forget all these people on the internet who are like, I spend $1 million. Those people are stupid. They're retarded, right? You don't need that. Could you spend it? Sure. Absolutely. Go take private jets and do all this other crap that you don't need to do. Just fly first class. Like I don't know. It's way better. Anyway, $33,000 a month. How about this? Take it a step further. Spend only half of that, right? Spend $16,000 a month. If you're 25 years old and you're spending $16K a month, like what are you spending money on? Really? Like don't go drink. Don't go do bottle service. Don't spend time with expensive women. That would probably be my number one recommendation. Is just go build and save. So you save half of that money, okay? Let's do some math, okay? If you took $4 million and you invested it, okay, and you reinvested the other balance, remember we're only taking half of our income, you're reinvesting that over a period of 30 years. So you'll be 55 when you pull this money out. And remember, this is continuing to compound and grow at a 5% interest rate, right? Meaning you're only making 5%, okay? Because you're compounding you're basically only investing half of your money or half of the income. So I backed it down to 5% with an interest rate variance of 2. That would mean that you have roughly $31 million in your pocket by the time you're 55, okay? And this is after your first exit at 25 years old, okay? Now you're seeing why this is going to be the infinite money glitch. And if you can generate a higher return, a 7% return, that puts you up to $52 million, right, by the time you're 55 on one exit. And the reason this is powerful is because it's compounded over 30 years at a very reasonable growth rate, and you're contributing a significant amount on a monthly basis, right? Now, are you going to continue to contribute that? I don't know. But you see the power of compounding, right? And like I said, planting a tree 20 years ago was the best time. The second best time is now. You're at the point, if you're young and you're building, this is your time. Like this is when you should be doing this. So that's why it's so important to get that one exit under your belt early, because you're literally like, you really have to screw up. Okay. Now, here's the best part. This is where the infinite money glitch comes in. You can do this over and over and over again. So if between 25 and 55, if you exit every 3 to 5 years, okay, meaning you could do this with one company at a time, 6 to 10 times before you retire at 55. Think about that, right? And you're going to get better at it. Now we have a portfolio of companies. We're doing this with multiple companies, and we're always looking to bring more in, right? Because what we do is we create wealth not only for ourselves and our holding company, but we're creating wealth for those people. And so I'm going to close with sharing one example of a young guy. His name is Paul. He's a terrific young man. When I met him, I was like, this kid has fantastic business instincts. Started at a young age, started at 19, had a lot of success. And he also is the founder of the software company that we're invested in. Helped him scale that business. We launched end of February, early March of last year. And that business today, I shouldn't jinx it, but we will crack, we're at the end of February, we will crack $100,000 a month. We did about 75 last month. So that business in just about a year, 0 to 100K a month. And the best thing about a software company, right? 100,000, that times 12, right, is 1.2 million. That company is going to be worth 3, maybe times 5, right? So that's a $3 to $6 million business as a 25-year-old. He's currently 25. If we were to exit that business, he would put, multiple 7 figures in his pocket, right? So this is what I'm trying to tell you. And then he'll have the money to do whatever he wants for the rest of his life. He can go buy any sports car he wants within reason. He's not buying a 250 GTO, but he could literally go buy $1 million car, right? And have millions in the bank left at 25. So and that's real money. This isn't like, fake internet stuff. This is real deal money. This is how you go and you build wealth. So I don't care if you're building a software company. I don't care if you're building an HVAC company, a flooring installation company, an education company. I don't care, right? Go out and create value, reverse engineer your targets, and figure out exactly when you want to exit and what that number is, what your magic number is on your first exit. Because remember, once you have one under your belt, you're going to have people falling into your lap wanting to work with you because you've done the thing that most entrepreneurs fail to ever do. And this is coming from someone who was trained in private equity, and I've exited multiple businesses. All right. So that's what I've got for you today. I hope you thought it was really, really valuable. Check out what we do in the link below. And if there's ever anything I can do to help, please feel free to DM me. Thank you, guys.